Hi, so I'm going to go ahead and present the next slideshow. It's doing business in China. Whoops, sorry. I'm not sure if you can see the slides on my laptop, but I'm trying to make it work. So, doing business in China. Why do business in China? Chinese culture, Chinese business culture, Chinese logistics, issues facing China, and cost of doing business in China. So we'll start with why do business in China. We need to understand basic information about China, what makes it attractive, China's dominating industries. So China has the fourth largest, is the fourth largest country behind Russia, Canada, and the U.S. They've been a modern country for over 50 years. They are a communist nation and transitioned to market economy. So 50% of the population lives in rural areas. They have a population of 1.35 billion. And yeah, like I said, 50% of them are living in rural areas, so that's not near big cities or anything like that. They have a limited per capita reserve, which is their natural resources are limited to, based on how many people that they have. So because they're so big, they don't have a lot of natural resources to sell. The basics about China: before 1978, it was a centrally planned economy, and then after that, they basically they quit being a centrally planned economy, and they actually, a lot of the villagers decided to move into bigger cities. So you have hardworking but low-cost work. So the world's second largest economic entity. In 2011, the GDP was 7.38 trillion, and that was based on how much they could buy. And they've been a WTO member since 2001. So economic prospects: in 1978, the reform period began. In 1992, committed to the ongoing open and reform policy. President Xi Jinping assumed power in 2013. The infrastructure that they use: heavy investment in the IT, with 1.15 billion cell phone users. That's incredible. Highway system exceeds 33,000 miles. The labor market: they have a high quality and low cost labor, like I was saying, and it's because the peasants had left their land for the urban areas, graduates searching for jobs. Consumer market: emerging consumer market, attractive market due to huge population and quickly growing economy. The urban areas are consumer markets for domestic investments and overseas investments. Manufacturing: they have really low-cost products. Most important manufacturer base in the world, and that kind of makes sense when you think of most of the stuff you buy, whether it's a camera or this laptop. This laptop's a Toshiba. Most of these things are made in China. So a lot of the world's products that are manufactured in China are cameras, air conditioners, televisions, washing machines, refrigerators. The hot industries are information technology, consumer electronics, software, logistics, and telecommunicating. Like I said, a lot of the stuff that we're using to make this video, even the smallest piece will be made in China. Automobiles, healthcare, and entertainment are also hot industries. So, in conclusion, to doing business in China, you need to understand the potential that lies in China for how big they are and how hard people are willing to work. They have a lot of upside. The factors that make China attractive in business locations. We'll go over Chinese culture now. So learning objectives are the Chinese culture and the Chinese people. So Chinese civilization started with Yan Di and Huang Dai. Emphasis is placed on the unification of China. The Qing dynasty, the first agricultural empire in Chinese history. I think that, there it says, okay. They're Confucius culture, so you have Confucius philosophy, guidance from different roles in a society, and then Daoism is the second one, interaction between nature and humans. And then there's a third, Buddhism, national religion, around 600 AD. Understanding Chinese face. It's a term. Manager meets needs of employees. Employees are treated with respect. Better to be overly polite. You must make friends before doing business. Just like we talked about in the video about Japan, they have similar cultures when it comes to how they like to run their business. The Ganzi, it's a term in Chinese meaning the relationship, distinguishes East Asian market economy and determines success of business. Must make friends before starting negotiations. So you can't walk in and just start, laying down a contract. You have to actually, sit down, have tea, get to know the person you're sitting across from. They have a very high savings rate, reason for saving, preparation for the future, no social security, and no medical insurance. And 1.35 billion people, that's a little bit too many people to have, probably a national, kind of like we do here, healthcare system or a social security. So you have to prepare for the future on your own. So the way that they do it, Chinese savings, younger generation saves less. They have credit cards, more time to travel. Customers are taken to the best restaurants, hosted in the best hotels. Chinese cuisine, particular about their food, prefer Chinese restaurants for dinner. It is funny because they do talk about KFC adapted to Chinese cuisine with their wonton pies and stuff like that. And KFC is the largest fast food chain in China, and I didn't realize that until looking at the slideshow. The roles of men and women in China. Traditionally, husbands were leaders of the family, wives took care of the children and the husbands. But today, women become educated and they're entering the job market. The characteristics of Chinese people: religion, Gankai, the relationship, and then the cuisine. Chinese culture differs from region to region. So, understand how to deal with Chinese people and how to handle most common business situations. So we have that same circle with an outer layer where the Chinese culture based the outside on respect for the business, respect for the business card, gift giving, and you need to learn to talk metric and speak slowly. If you go inside of that, flexibility, name and title, and then inside of that you'll reach success. So business culture is just starting to develop. Chinese culture drives the business culture. Foreign investments increasingly influence business environment. Schedule and timing, just as like I was talking about in the Japanese culture, most Southeast Asian countries are very big on being on time and being polite. So do not expect a detailed agenda for meetings. Many uncertainties in the business environment, so you're not going to sit down and go straight into talking about it. You might sit there and talk about your families or a vacation or something you went on while you're having tea before you get into any business talk. Prepare for the unexpected, and the cell phone is helpful. Chinese name and title. Do not call colleagues by their first names in China. Manager is dressed by last name and title Chen Jingli. Head of company is dressed by last name and Zong. English names have improved communication. So if you end up having to go to dinner for a business meeting, become friends before you discuss any work-related issues. Dinner is a good way to become friends. After dinner, the Chinese like to do karaoke and drink, and they like their massages. So those are all fun things, in my opinion. Indulge. Flexibility and credibility. Personal experience necessary to judge credible partners. So they will use past experiences with Americans to make their decision. But if you're patient, you can win their trust. Government intervention during negotiations, depending on the business, especially when it comes to laws. Like if you're trying to open something over there that we have here, the government's going to want a certain percentage of revenue, and then it's monitored while it progresses. Respect the business card, present and receive with both hands. Understand titles, never write on it, only translate name and title. So speak slowly and no slang. If you need a translator, feel free to get one. If it's necessary, they won't be offended. And slang may not be understood. That's a good point when you're, something that we find common slang here, something that makes sense to any American might be misinterpreted and offend them. Don't expect much eye contact with the Chinese. They tend to stare down a lot. It's challenging to them, and they're non-confrontational. Give a gift, like we talked about in the last presentation. Give a gift at the end to show that you appreciate them and that you'd like to work with them in the future. The yes, Chinese yes, or next time may be a courteous way of just getting you out. So you need to ask for confirmation. So be careful about that. In conclusion, you want to understand from that part of the chapter basic aspects of Chinese business environment, business card, the gift giving, the special meaning of numbers, and not making much eye contact. It's actually fairly similar to the Japanese culture. Chinese logistics, current obstacles and opportunities. Before the 1980s government slogan was "Build a road to connect to every village." After 1978, they began focusing on logistical infrastructure. By 2012, they had 56,000 miles of railway, 2.2 million miles of roadway, 46,000 miles of highway, and 182 commercial airports. They want to grow in transportation, so they're hoping to grow 17.8%. The supply chain services is far behind, so that causes them to lose out on money, which causes poor service results and huge losses. Backwards management and service concepts, no integrated supply chain, modern supply chain not yet developed. There's Eastern and Western China, which causes problems. Most freight carried by train or roads. Strategy pursued by firms, self-use transportation, joint ventures, local logistics service providers. Customs is an issue of logistics also, so if somebody in the Western and Eastern China see differently, they more than likely won't do business, and it will cause the people of China to suffer a little bit in that sense. Some issues facing China, historical problems of the economy, current problems surrounding the Chinese economy, fast-paced economic growth, aggravated the following: population and birth control. So I think right now they're allowed to have 2 kids, unless they've had a boy the first time around. unbalanced development. There's a lot of corruption and environmental protection. In 2012, China's population was 1.34 billion. Birth control program was implemented in the 1970s. Problems of population, per capita resource, and then the education level. Yeah, birth control program is called the one-child policy. One child per couple. Now preference for one child because high cost of raising children. I did hear though that like if you were rich, you could pay to have another child, pay the government to have another child, but I'm not sure if that's true. So, urban and rural areas. Urban areas are modern infrastructure, better quality food. Rural, there's no electricity. Peasants pay higher taxes. Across the regions, coastal areas are wealthier than interior, and that's because ships and everything can come in, supplies can come in. Provinces near border countries have better trade opportunities, which makes sense also. Provinces near China Sea are most developed parts in China. The major deterrent to health of the economy, government agencies, police force, and business units because of the corruption. Bribery and government officials, U.S. laws forbid bribery. Chinese regulations often unclear. They kind of will look the other way if they need to. Government officials' authority on laws and regulations set heavier fines, and that's also can be looked at from a negative aspect because they can do it just purely if they know that they can get away with it. Environmental protection, growth at the expense of the government. Polluted cities, 4 out of 10. 38% of land suffers from soil erosion. Foreign investments can be blamed for pollution. They're just trying to build as much as they can and don't really worry necessarily about the environment. Local businesses create most of the pollution. Will gradually strengthen environmental protection laws, they say. They have SARS was an epidemic in the early 2000s. Began in 2002, Hong Kong in 2003. It then moved for Vietnam, Singapore, Canada, Germany. There's 8,000 possible causes. I'm sure you've seen plenty of videos where they're wearing their face masks just to protect themselves. That big a worry when you have that size population. The bird flu. So problems facing China's economy and the impact that they'll have on the rest of the world, whether it's the environmental side or the corruption that we spoke about. So, kind of expensive to do business in China. Factors are the economic and political. Government will step in and put heavy taxes on companies if they can. Planned economy for 40 years, so government regulated all economic activities. Entered market economy, yet differences in labor force, tax systems, and financing systems. Chinese labor force, 34% of labor force is in agriculture. Peasants create urban unemployment, risking resources for the social welfare. Labor unions, state-owned companies have labor unions. Private companies don't, though. Foreign-funded enterprises develop labor unions to keep in compliance with their own countries. Chinese companies, this is kind of cool. They provide lifetime employment, social benefits, but low wages. I think lifetime employment sounds kind of good. At least you know you're going to have a steady job in this economy. Private and foreign companies now provide high wages but low benefits, so you got to pick your poison. Minimum salary for Chinese is $165 a month, but like we spoke about earlier, when it comes to just how they live, a lot of them are in the rural areas where there's no electricity, so you can get by on a lot of bartering and trading rather than having pure cash. Companies must join the social welfare system, housing stipends, unemployment insurance, medical insurance, and pensions. Comparison with us here in the U.S., good relationship between unions and management. May not have enough awareness to protect themselves, though. They have a corporate tax rate of 25%. Considering adopting one equal tax system, which might not work well for the poor, but it's something that they're looking into. Potential merger of the state and local tax. State and local tax. Problem with it is firms do not know where to report. Banking. There's a higher risk of doing business in China versus the U.S. Insufficient financial information, like we were talking about with it when it comes to money slipping under the table. And there's a case study at the end, but I think I'll go ahead and stop here. And just like the last time, there's a video that I would play at the beginning or the end, depending on, I guess, how I felt. So I'm going to attach that video, so you'll have it, and that concludes this presentation. Thank you.